I grew up surrounded by people who were volunteer firefighters. I used to think they were nuts running out of the house at 2 in the morning or talking about how good a barn fire was. I wanted to tell the story of who these people are and what they do and why they do it all for free. The Center Square Volunteer Fire Company in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania was right around the corner from my house. So I made a 2-year deal with the fire chief and the company took a vote on it. I'd be a volunteer for the first year, and the second year they'd let me respond to every call I could make with my camera rolling. What you're about to see is a pretty typical year in the life of a pretty typical volunteer fire company. What I found out was being a volunteer firefighter is anything but typical.
Funding for this program was provided by Motorola, a full supplier of paging communications equipment to the Volunteer Fire Service. Selective Insurance, a multi-line property and casualty insurance company protecting the volunteer since 1926. Two-way mobile communication, meeting the communication needs of emergency services personnel since 1953. And Provident Agency, accident insurance meeting the challenging demands of emergency services personnel today and tomorrow.
It started around 6:30 last night and quickly spread. 200 firefighters from 11 departments in the Montgomery Township area were on the scene.
For nearly 3 hours before firefighters declared.
Fire, which broke out just before dawn today, gutted the front portion of the building.
Volunteers answered all of these fire calls. 1.5 million volunteer firefighters are responsible for protecting over 70% of the United States.
To help us find out exactly what happened here.
But it's bingo, ham suppers, and coin tosses where the volunteers get most of their exposure. Less than 10% of the community will ever actually need the services of their volunteer fire company.
Well, my dad started me in 1924 at the age of 7, believe it or not. That happened because we lived on a farm, and normal practice then was to burn in the spring, freshen the fields. And Dad set one and left to get a little bit too large. So we had a little bit of a time putting this thing out.
When you're a little kid, all of a sudden Daddy leaves, and you don't know where he goes in the middle of the night, and then he comes back and tells us stories of how he put out this fire and this and that. And you want to hear more, but you don't understand it enough to really grasp what he's saying. And then you get that big chance to become a fireman. So you jump right into it because you finally get your chance to go home and tell stories.
I was about 7 when Matt and Kevin joined, and I always used to, they'd bring their boots home, and I'd climb in their boots, walk around the house, and be like, oh, I can't wait, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a fireman. And then they used to joke around with me, and they'd be like, yeah, you're going to join when you turn 16, and I joined right after I turned 16.
As far as my actual getting involved, it's different than most people. I have no history in my family of anybody being a firefighter, which is not normal in this business. A friend of mine and I were just driving down the street one day, and we drove by this firehouse, and we just happened to say to each other, why don't we go in and see what they do? And if you believe in fate, it was what I was meant to do. A woman in a small foreign car drove right underneath the rear end of a tractor trailer. The tractor trailer drove up over half of the car, and when I got to the car initially, the first time I looked inside the car, the wreckage was so bad I couldn't even find the person in the car. It was only till the second time when I moved around a bit that I could find that there was still a person in the car.
Okay, Medevac 2, when you come in over that low building, did you notice the one telephone pole that's stuck up?
Yes, sir. Okay.
It
took us about an hour and 15 minutes to cut her out of the car, and she did die in the car before we got her out. We had medevac people there, we had a doctor on the scene, and they were trying everything they could to keep this woman alive, and they just couldn't do it.
This group is not all hard-nosed, go-get-'em type people. They do have hearts. They do. I've seen people cry at scenes because they just can't believe the severity of a situation.
A volunteer fireman, you've got a wide variety of people, but basically you're looking at someone that's looking for a little bit more out of life in two aspects. One, they're looking to give something back to their community, and I guess everybody would like to think that that is the key reason, but in a lot of instances, they're also looking for more out of their own life. They're looking for a little bit more excitement. They're looking, in some instances, to have a little bit of authority, a little bit of power.
You help people, but you're anonymous. Like, I don't like people knowing who I am. And I mean, this way I'm part of a group, and like, I'm not just one single individual, like on an ambulance or something like that. You're singled out. And with the fire company, it's a whole group of people trying to help one person or two people or a family.
It has to be done. It's a necessary factor, has been since Billy Penn came to this country, as far as this state's concerned, as far as the nation's concerned. That's our history.
This roof is real spongy over here.
That's one of the things that get firemen a crazy title, is when they talk about a good fire or a good accident. We train continuously. We train on a weekly basis. We have people go every month to schools and take hundreds of hours of classes to become better firemen. They need a chance to use that. They didn't set these people's house on fire. They didn't crash these two cars together. But if it's a large-scale fire or a large-scale accident or something like that, they want to be the ones called so that they can put their skills to use.
Wait a minute! Hey, Matt! 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 Radio, go ahead. Back down! It's flashing over top of you.
I feel that being a fireman has got to be the most bravest thing you could do because of how dangerous it is. And I think a lot of people just don't know what it is until their house burns, and they realize how much of a job it is to protect a dwelling place or somebody's life.
In 1893, the Rainbow Volunteer Fire Company in Reading, Pennsylvania was already 120 years old. Incorporated March 17, 1773, it's the oldest continually operating volunteer fire company in the country. Less than 25 years ago, this and just about every other firehouse in the country had a siren or a horn that called the volunteers to an emergency. Some still do. Today's fire whistle is this pager. This monitor receiver alerts the station's volunteers, tells them the nature of the emergency, and gives them the exact location.